Brilliant. We're just going to get started in a minute or so. Just welcome a few more people into the room. But please, as I said before, please introduce yourself into the chat. It'd be great to see who's in the room and where you're from, what you got for lunch, more importantly. Great. I think we'll get started. So, Brynhound Alpalbon, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn How to Run Agile series ceremony session. This is the final session in our autumn series, where we're aiming to provide you with a foundational understanding of digital and agile and what that means in the context of delivery of public services as a way to help teams develop their products and services. I'm Mike Erskine, Communications Manager here at the CDPS and part of the Learn Digital Skills and Connecting Digital Professionals service. Today's session is being recorded and will be made available on our Lunch and Learn playlist on YouTube for you to watch back and share with colleagues. So here you can access all our previous Lunch and Learn sessions. I think we've had about 18 in total so far, which have covered a huge variety of topics, from how to build inclusive and accessible digital services to how to run a workshop to map your service. So we have set this session up as a webinar, so you won't be seen or heard on screen unless you want to come forward at the end to ask any questions. In the meantime, please introduce yourself in the chat, and again, pop any questions that come into your head during the presentation. We'll make sure there is time for some questions at the end. Today's session is only 30 minutes in length, so please try and turn off any other distractions. I would like to welcome my colleague Ebony, who is our lead training and learning designer here at the Centre for Digital Public Services, and working with myself as part of the Learn Digital Skills service. So, Shemai, Ebony, and yeah, thanks for coming today to deliver this session.
My pleasure. Shemai, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me, and thank you for that lovely introduction, Mike. I really appreciate it. So, as Mike's mentioned, we're going to talk about how to run Agile ceremonies today. Before we get stuck in, I just had a couple of questions that we sent out before this Lunch and Learn that I was just really interested to find out the answers in. So the questions that we asked a cross-section of people was, does your team run a daily meeting? And does your team meet regularly to review work/practices? So we had a number of people reply, just a small cross section, and we had a real split here. So in terms of the daily meeting, we had 3 saying yes, 4 saying no. And then in terms of meeting regularly to review work/processes, we had an overwhelming 7 saying yes. Now, the reason I asked this question is because it really does potentially feed into the things that we're going to talk about today. So getting started, how to run Agile ceremonies. So the first thing I wanted to start with is, what is a ceremony? Because some of you may not be aware. So I thought it'd be good to define that before we get cracking. So an Agile ceremony is effectively a touch point or a meeting, and is one of the ways teams can work to embed Agile. So that's why I was really keen to ask those questions and to see what you guys are doing at the moment. Now, whilst a meeting doesn't necessarily just purely make you agile, if you are currently running these meetings, hopefully this Lunch and Learn will give you some ideas of how you could potentially tweak it, or for some more ideas of how you can run it to make those meetings more agile. And if you're not doing it at the moment, maybe this Lunch and Learn will give you some ideas of things that you might want to implement to start working in this way. So each ceremony has a different purpose that helps us foster these agile ways of working and embed the principles. Because remember, when we talk about becoming agile, we know that there are many kind of ways of working and mechanisms which can help us achieve this. But being agile is really all about the mindset and adopting the manifesto and the principles. So back to our 4 ceremonies. The 4 ceremonies that agile teams tend to run are daily stand-ups, sprint planning meetings, team reviews, and retros. So we'll be discussing most of these, and I will touch on sprint planning meetings, but it's not something we'll cover in depth in this session. So for those of you that might not be familiar with the word sprint, I just thought I'd define that up front as well. So a sprint is a defined period of time where we complete a set amount of work or tasks. So we will touch on why we aren't going into the detail for that ceremony, and how you can find out more shortly, just when we get to that. So the last thing I wanted to introduce you to before we get into running Agile ceremonies is this tool called the Team Onion. I love the name of that, first of all. But the reason that I wanted to introduce you to it is that we recognize that within different organizations and different settings, there are different setups to how teams work on products and services. So by using the Team Onion model, this can help you identify who should be attending each of the ceremonies without naming specific roles. So the thing to say is this isn't a stakeholder map, rather a way to identify the key people that contribute to the products and services you provide. So just to go through the 3 tiers of the Team Onion, we have the core team, which is in the center. And those are the individuals that are actively every day contributing towards your products or services. So in a best practice Agile environment, this would be your multidisciplinary team, say a product manager, a delivery manager, user research, interaction design, etc. And then in terms of the kind of second layer of the Team Onion, what we have there is the collaborators. So these tend to be people that bring specialist information and reduce external dependencies. They may be people like suppliers or subject matter experts. And then when we get to our final layer of the Team Onion, we have supporters. And these are individuals that need broad stroke updates that can be roles like board members or things like that. So people that are really looking about how the work aligns to organizational priorities. So let's get started looking at the ceremonies. So we're going to start with stand-ups, and if you're not doing this already, this might be one of the easiest ways to start introducing ceremonies to your teams. And if you are doing it, hopefully this might give you some guidance or clarify how Agile teams run them. So why do we run stand-ups at all? Well, stand-ups encourage collaboration and accountability and visibility of the work that we're doing. So thinking about our Team Onion, who should be attending stand-ups? Well, our stand-ups are mainly for our core product team who are working day in and day out on the service or product, and you'll see why in just a minute. So how do we run a stand-up? Well, stand-ups takes place every day and runs approximately for 15 minutes, which is why it might be a good one to start with because it doesn't take up too much time. But the reason that it's called a stand-up is in typical situations where we were face-to-face in the past, or maybe you're still face-to-face now, you are encouraged to stand up for the duration of the meeting to make sure it's short and snappy. Also, because we're only doing this with core team members, we don't have reams and reams of people to get through, so we should be able to keep it to 15 minutes. However, if one individual can't attend, it doesn't get rearranged, it goes on regardless. These meetings take place every day at the same time, and a lot of teams do this in the morning because it helps set expectation and work for the day. This meeting does require a level of discipline because it can be easy to kind of run away with the ideas of wider themes and updates. However, stand-ups are meant to be used to ask 3 key questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And do you have any blockers? Because of its frequency and being able to highlight blockers and challenges, we can identify bottlenecks before they become too problematic, and it ultimately creates a space to follow up where needed. This isn't a status update, but an opportunity to ask for help and collaborate. And whilst team members may ask for short explanations, we don't have that kind of fully fledged problem-solving discussion here. This meeting helps to kind of shape where we might need to follow up, and to basically unblock those areas that are needed. So when we're running a stand-up, we should do this in front of what is called a team wall or our product backlog. So we do this as a visual representation of where our work is at any one time. And obviously, if we're talking about what we did yesterday and what we're doing today, we would be able to see this represented. This makes sure that everyone has visibility about what's going on. So if some of you are not familiar with the idea of a team wall or a product backlog, what this is a digital or physical space where you can record individual pieces of work on a card or a sticky note, and then we attach them to a digital or physical wall. So as I said, it can be digital or physical, but we have headings that represent each stage of the production of the things that we're doing, and we move the individual items or tickets through the different stages. So how do you set up a team wall? Well, team walls, as I said, use headings that are relevant. So it could be as simple as having something as to do, doing, done, that you then move your different tickets through. But there are different flavors. So like in our service, we use columns such as in review or blocked, and we code our cards to link back to quarterly priorities. People also use it as a kind of central place for team information, both of kind of for visibility, but also around how they work, roles and responsibilities as well. So how do team walls help, and why do we do stand up in front of them? So team walls help you to manage the work you've agreed to do. So we have that visible reference, and it allows us to see how things are progressing and basically talk about those bottlenecks that we said that we talk about in stand up. By working openly in this way and sharing information, everyone can use it to promote collaboration, conversation, and innovation. And ultimately, that's the purpose of stand up. It also becomes a tangible focal point we can use to reference. And it also helps us make decisions on the overview of our work. We also use team walls within our next ceremony that we're going to touch on, which is sprint planning. So as I mentioned, we're not going to go into massive depth about sprint planning, but sprint planning is a ceremony that's held at the beginning of each sprint, which, as you can remember, we defined a sprint as a defined period of time where we complete a set amount of tasks. So sprint planning meetings help the team to decide what work they will take on within that increment or sprint and how they will deliver it. The length of the meeting really depends on kind of the length of the sprint. And what happens within it is items that sit in the to-do or the product backlog of the team wall will then be pulled into the sprint for teams to then be able to work on. And it also gives us a chance to kind of get into a deeper discussion about those blockers and dependencies. So it sounds basic enough, right? So why aren't I going into further detail of it on this Lunch and Learn? Well, when we do sprint planning, there's lots of things to consider. Some of you might be thinking, actually, I don't have a team wall yet. How can I create one of these to start sprint planning? But there are also other things that we need to consider, like how do we make sure what we're bringing into the sprint is representing the highest value? How can we make sure we're setting realistic task loads for each sprint? And how can we make sure that the items in our to-do are aligned to our vision? And ultimately, how do we define acceptance criteria if more tasks are coming in? So there's lots of things to consider. We do cover this on our Teams course, and we give you these additional tools for your team wall, but also for sprint planning. So if this is something that is of interest to you, please feel free to go to our expression of interest form and let us know. For complete transparency, we are booked up now for our Teams courses until April. However, we are digitizing our courses to try and reach more people. So if you would be interested in testing this, or if you would be interested in going on this course, please let us know through our expression of interest course, and we'll be in touch with further details. So just to kind of summarize within sprint planning, the people that attend sprint planning will be the core team as well, because ultimately they're the people that decide how the increment is built based on the information and data that we consume. So the third ceremony we're going to be looking at are show and tells. So why do we do show and tells? Show and tells basically act as agile governance by keeping everyone up to date, showcasing the iterations and the progress we're making towards our goal, as well as showing learnings along the way. Show and tells allow us to work in the open, get feedback, and encourage us to prioritize a working product or service. So who comes to show and tells or product demos? Well, for this particular one, you can bring anyone, depending who's relevant, all the way up to supporters. You know, here at CDPS, we're very open with our show and tells. You can actually view some on our YouTube channel if you want to have a look at how we have run them in the past. And whilst kind of working in the open isn't a strict agile principle, you know, it's still very much best practice, you know, and really fosters accountability and actively showing progress about what we're doing. Show and tells, or product demos as sometimes they're referred, means that we're regularly showing the work we do, and in line with the principles, it means it keeps us iterating frequently. So with show and tells, how do we run them? So when do they take place? Well, show and tells normally take place at the end of a sprint or iteration. We will move on to retros in a minute, and retros take place at the end of a sprint or iteration also, but retros would take place at the end of every sprint or iteration. Show and tells might be kind of a bit more spread out, depending how you guys choose to work. They last anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour, and the aim is really about showing the progress we're making towards our goals in our product and services. So if you're showcasing your work, if you're putting on a show and tell, some top tips with that is, number one, set the scene. This is so important because ultimately storytelling is a powerful tool to help create context for your organization or other people. The key thing that people always forget is show the product itself. The reason it's called a show and tell is because we want to be showing the things that we're doing, what we're finding, and what we're learning from it. So think more show and less tell. We need to make sure we're anonymizing personal data and identifiers. And then the last thing is being honest about what worked and what hasn't. Remember, when we work in agile environments, it's all about pivoting to change. So if we're getting everything 100% perfect, right, maybe we just need to look and assess if that is the case, or we might be missing something. But if we do that, I mean, that is amazing, right? But this is ultimately a great opportunity to show your most important work, get feedback, but also show how your work relates to other people's work within the business. So what do you need to run a show and tell? So you can do this digitally or physically. It's completely up to you. If you're doing it online, you will effectively just need the conference tool and the product that you're showing or the service that you're showing. Now, I appreciate that not everyone might work in digital services, so it might not be like a new feature or something like that. It could even be something like research findings. What it's all about is showing the most important work that you've done and how you're progressing against what we're trying to do. If you're doing it in person, you'll need a room big enough to fit everyone, a screen, and then obviously your product, service, or presentation around your research that you're kind of showcasing. So we're just going to move on to the kind of final Agile ceremony and kind of talk a bit about that as well. So the final one that we're going to talk about today is retrospectives. So why do we do retrospectives? So retrospectives are a ceremony or meeting or touch point that help us reflect and improve around the ways of working as a team. And it helps us to address any thematic or recurring issues and make sure that we're constantly iterating to what we need to do. So doing these regularly means we can assess what's effective, what's not, and what people need to do so we can ultimately provide better products and services through our ways of working. So who attends retrospectives? Once again, this is just the core team, because like stand-ups, it's all about ways of working. It's all about being collaborative. So those people that we're working day to day with obviously will need to be the people reflecting on this. So how do we run a retrospective? So as I said, retros tend to take place at the end of an iteration or sprint. In our service, our sprints last every 2 weeks, and we do them with our sprint planning session. They take between 60 and 90 minutes. And in terms of how we run a retro, it goes something like this. So we have one person hosting, and there are many flavors of retro as well that you can run depending what you're trying to achieve. However, the general themes are kind of the same as we go through. What we want to do is we want to set the scene, telling people what we're trying to achieve, what it's about. And then we ask questions that help to inform the agenda, keep the questions as broad as possible so we can recognize the important things that we need to tackle within the team. So we could ask questions specific to team working, or you could ask people to share their thoughts around specific areas, or you could just ask questions such as what went well, what didn't go well, and what will we change. The most important thing about retros is they need to have an important atmosphere where every team member feels comfortable speaking honestly and confidently with and that the colleagues will listen to them. So a basic retro starts with the host explaining the questions at the beginning. What will happen then is they'll have post-it notes on the wall, digital or otherwise, physical if needed, that show you each individual question. Then each member of the team writes down one or more answers for each of the questions and attaches it to the relevant one. Then there's discussion of each of these different themes, and the group then decides actions to fix any problems raised. And as a team, they assign who is going to be making the next move. The aim is to get all these actions done by the next retro, so then we can re-look back and see if that's made any changes in terms of our ways of working and the things we're delivering. So how do we actually run a retro if you wanted to start doing one? Well, again, physical or digital, it doesn't matter. The most important thing is that you're trying to get it done. So, if you're doing it in a physical space, really all you need is post-it notes, a table, wall, pens, and obviously that psychological safety that we just talked about. If you're doing it online, you still need the psychological safety, but you can use tools like Miro to help facilitate this digitally. That gives you those digital post-it notes. The good thing about Miro as well is if you can use Miro, if you choose to use it, they have hundreds of templates that you can choose from already. So you can have a look at ones that are already created. This is actually one that we've used in our team before, brings a bit of fun, a bit of piratey-ness to our retros on Fridays. And this one is just simply, what went well, shout out to your teams, what didn't go so well, and action points for the future. So that was our whistle-stop tour of the kind of 4 key ceremonies, that Agile teams run. I guess some top tips for any good Agile ceremony. The whole thing about Agile is about collaboration and talking to each other. We want people to really listen, think about what that person is saying, who they are, what they need from you. You know, sometimes it's really easy to be in our heads thinking about the next thing to say, and it does take time. As a person that gets really excited and is always talking, you know, it is a skill that needs practicing in terms of actively listening to what that person's saying, so we're not just solutionizing or assuming we know what they're saying. Being empathetic is really important, you know, understanding motivations of our teammates, you know, and kind of understanding where they're coming from. Disagreement is fine and is part of innovation, but it's all about being respectful, and it's so important. And this goes for speaking too, right? Consider how what you're saying is affecting other people and linking it to their own priorities. Being flexible is really important. You know, as we've said, being agile means adopting the principles. And it's important to remember there's no one size fits all approach to agile ways of working. What works for one team might be different for another. So it's all about finding what works for you. And then the last point is very much creating cultural alignment. The best processes in the world ultimately won't deliver if you don't have the culture to support it. Agile ceremonies are ultimately supported by a culture where people feel that they are safe to raise issues, you know, and a culture where we value continuous improvement. So I just wanted to share this quote from Novartis, which is, you know, psychological safety is a common theme that we talk about all the time, but ultimately you can't be in a successful agile environment if we're not fostering this. And the reason Agile requires such a fundamental change in attitude is because we are personally opening ourselves up to vulnerability. So as an example, you know, if I propose an idea and it doesn't work well in practice, and we recognize that within the retro, I need to know that I'm safe to make that mistake and learn from it without repercussions. Now, that doesn't mean we don't hold each other to account, and it doesn't mean we speak things under the carpet, but ultimately we need to be able to iterate and improve on what we do, because that's the essence of Agile. Agile is not safe to apply if we don't have the psychological safety in our teams, and the behaviors we want to encourage won't be possible if people think that the Agile principles are words but not backed up by the actions we see. So we need to be responsible for the changes we want to see and take personal responsibility to making the changes that are required. So as I mentioned, these ceremonies help us embody some of these principles. And if you aren't familiar with the Agile principles, I would implore you to go have a look, print them out, stick them on your wall, because that's what we want to live by. So which Agile principles do these ceremonies help us embody? Well, sprint planning allows us to deliver value to users early as we're prioritizing and delivering against what the largest user need is. Show and tells help us embrace change through feedback. And retros help us change. If there's something that's inevitably not working, and it shows us that we should be curious about change. You know, retros also help us inspect and pivot to what we need to do. And all of these ceremonies mean that we can communicate face to face. And when I say communicating face to face, this was written before the pandemic. What we really mean is about collaboration, you know, and meaningful interactions. And that's even more if we're in a remote environment or a hybrid environment, because we need to make sure the interactions that we're having are really, truly meaningful. So looking at the last 6 principles, sprint planning and retros can help us measure progress by what we deliver. As we start to work out as a team what our capacity is, you know, it also means that we can help to have sustainable pace, because we only accept the work that we can only accept work that we can actually take on. And they all allow us to keep focus on quality and excellence, as it allows us to unblock things early and change to deliver a solution that works. Stand-ups and retros can help us collaborate and self-organize by taking on tasks to unblock and improve. And sprint planning, show and tells helps deliver frequently, and prioritizing and having specific times to show the work that we're doing. So just before we close, I wanted to say this comment that I'm sure some of you are thinking, but you can't currently type to me because you're all on mute. But I don't have time for more meetings, is I imagine what some of you may be thinking. Well, what I would just say to that is that I completely understand. But, you know, these meetings or these ceremonies, touch points, whatever we want to use the words to kind of get this across, you know, they can ultimately substitute many other meetings. You know, with stand-ups, meaning we have full visibility and accountability from the whole team, the manager role becomes less about updates and managing workload and more about coaching, because we have that openness. You know, it means we can iterate and improve the ways of working regularly. So ultimately we can try and fail quickly, or fail learning quickly. So we don't have to have meetings about, oh, how do we solve that problem? Because we're always actively working to solve these problems. So by implementing meetings with purpose, it helps to reduce unneeded touch points, because we have regular cadences to collaborate, revise and pivot. And if you don't believe me, give it a go and see. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, Ebony, thank you very much. That was great. And as someone, I mean, I've been at CDPS for over a year now. I mean, well, that's flown by, but I remember, yeah, kind of diving into this, into this world of agile ceremonies. And I think straight away you're sort of like, God, I don't have time for all of these things. So it's, I think that first of all is the first scary thing, I think, isn't it? I haven't got time for that and this. Is it one of the things that everything is a package, you have to do it as a package, or can you start things off slowly? Can you just do the stand-ups, daily stand-ups, 15 minutes every morning with your team? Like, what do you recommend as a way? Did you dive in with everything, or just do it piece by piece?
Oh, that's a great question. Thanks, Mike. I think we all have to do what we can within our circle of influence. We always talk about that, right? We recognize that change can take time and it's not all going to happen overnight. So even if you just want to start by trying one agile ceremony, go for it. You have nothing to lose. We're trying to, just like agile, we're trying to iterate over time, maintain a sustainable pace about the things we're trying to do. So don't feel like it's completely overwhelming and you've got to do all this stuff at once. The whole thing about agile as well, as I keep saying, is it's all about the principles and manifesto, and it is flexible for different teams. So I would encourage people to just give it a go where they feel they can fit it in, or just maybe even tweak some of the meetings that they're doing currently, to I guess adopt some of these skills and tools to see if it makes a difference to their working practices.
Right. And I think we had a comment from Andrea in the chat box. She says, we tried elements of agile in projects which needed rapid delivery, and the meetings feel like using precious time needlessly, but it ends up being time well spent and has resulted in more efficient delivery at the end of the day. Also allows really fast and timely resolution of issues. That's a really good yeah.
Amazing. I'm so glad that it's worked for you, and I completely appreciate that it can feel a bit like a thankless task initially while we onboard things, but change does take time, and I'm so glad that you've seen some of the positives. So thank you so much for sharing your experience.
Have you found it easier facilitating this in a virtual environment, Ebony, for teams, or how do you see it? From sort of actually people who work in an office space to people like CDPS, we work full time pretty much remotely.
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I've worked with product teams previously that have actually had their team wall or product backlog in an office on sticky notes. That was 8 years ago, so everyone was face to face then. And I think it just, again, it depends what works for you, right? If you are in the office all the time, there's no harm doing it face to face. Digitally, in some ways, it's easier because you don't risk your sticky notes falling off the wall. Is the only thing. You need some pretty secure glue. But I think whatever works for you really is the key, and your team.
Yeah, I mean, I've really felt like the value of just giving everyone a voice, I think virtually as well, because I think sometimes, again, those office environments, you can have some individuals that dominate meetings and conversations. I think this setup I found, it gives the stand-ups and the retros, everyone a chance to input, which I think, definitely it's created definitely more of a quality of a team, no hierarchy as well. So that's just great. Brilliant. Does anyone have any further questions for Ebony that we'd like to ask? Anyone there who wants to raise anything? Brilliant, Ebony. Looks like you've covered a lot off there, and that brings me nicely to some feedback we'd like to get from you from today's session. So if you don't mind, if you've got some time now to log on to menti.com, there's a slide on the screen now, Ebony. I don't know if you can forward on to menti.com, and you can enter the code 78449248 just to give us some instant feedback from today, really. So just to really, we just want to find out if the Lunch and Learn today made sense to you. Did you learn something new today? And would you like to start sharing these learnings within your own organization? That would be great for us to know. And also, if you still have any questions, and also, we've also asking what's your main takeaway from today's session. Always good to know. No pun intended on takeaways and lunches. Really be good to know what your main takeaways from today. And as this is the final session in our autumn series, we would also like to ask you what you would like to see covered in future Lunch and Learns. We're planning a winter series that's going to start in December and take us through to sort of January, February next year. But we really like you to shape that series, really. What would you like to see covered? What topics would you like to see covered already? Again, please go to our Lunch and Learn playlist, because a lot of those topics may have been covered already, but we're very happy to repeat some sessions if there's demand. So if you could fit in that Menti and let us know, that would be really valuable feedback for us as a planning team. And just to let you know about what's coming up, this is another really hot topic at the moment, AI. We're running an AI monthly webinar series at the moment. We've had 2 sessions already, one looking at what is AI, and then we've also done looking at one with the Equality and Human Rights Commission and looking at the sort of the equity piece within AI. So we've had 2 sessions already, and now we've got 1 session coming up this Thursday about procuring AI in the public sector. And this webinar will really cover the importance of being intelligent clients, who's doing what in this space, and existing help and resources available to support you and your organization. So if this session is for you, great. Please log on and onto our website and register your place. But if you know that any colleagues that may be interested in this, then please share the link. And we look forward to seeing you there on Thursday with our external experts, Kershaw Commercial, that will be delivering that session. And finally, before we go, I plug this every time, every Lunch and Learn at the moment, but we've got a really good book that we have been collaborating with the public sector on. It's on trio writing, so designing bilingual content for user-centered services. Really great book. We've got a physical copy you can order, or you can get the download of the ebook for free. So again, there might be some links in the chat. We'll send all the info in a follow-up email to you all as well. But yeah, just wanted to let you know, if you are interested in the concept of trio writing and want to find out more, then please go and download the book, in a nice little early Christmas present there for you all. And dare I say the word Christmas. That's it. So thanks for everybody for today, attending today's Lunch and Learn. And we'll be in touch with all the sort of resources and links from today's session and let you know about what's coming up. So thank you. Have a good rest of the day. Enjoy your lunch if you haven't had it, and we'll see you soon.